Pete Porter, Peteporter.
And how old were you at the time of the 1964 flood?
I was 14.
Okay, I'm going to have you say that in a complete sentence so that people know what. So, how old were you during the 1964 flood?
I was 14 years old during the 1964 flood.
Okay. And what was your family doing for a living during the flood?
My father, Fritz, he was a cat skinner for Pacific Lumber Company in Scotia, and my mother was raising children.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I have 2 brothers, 2 sisters.
Can I pause for 1 second? Sorry, Pete. We have you in a rocker, which is not a great idea, but I tried to prop it a little bit.
Oh, am I moving?
No, if you just kind of sit where what's comfortable for you. Go ahead.
Yeah, you go ahead and lean back, and
comfortable.
he'll get it kind of wedged in there so that.
wedge that in a little bit.
Yeah, he's got a chair behind.
That's not been bothering my focus.
I think that'll do it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, I'll try not to move.
That's okay.
I know we don't want to make you so stiff that you can't move at all. So don't feel like you can't move at all.
Okay.
So so your dad did cat skinning, and then you had brothers and sisters who were living at home at the time.
Yes, they were.
And tell us just in general, what were your experiences during the flood?
Well, we were young, and we got to, it was amazing to us to see the river come up so fast, and we saw cattle floating down and barns floating down and railroad tracks getting washed away, and just prior to the flood, we hiked up to Chalk Mountain, which is just behind me, and it's about 2,100 feet. And we walked into snow up to here. Of course, we were kids, and it was an 11-mile hike, uphill, not both ways, like our dad said. But it was we got into 4 feet of snow, and just before the flood. So, that was one of the things that caused it.
That's interesting because we interviewed the guy at NOAA last week, and he was showing us maps and snowfall on the ground, and it was just showing trace amount of snowfall on the ground right prior to the flood. So we had talked to him about this theory that the snow melting was really what propelled the flood, and he seemed to think that there really wasn't a lot of snow that influenced it. But it sounds like your experience was you experienced quite a bit of snow.
Well, I think snow dropped in different places. It doesn't, it's like rain. Sometimes it'll drop. There might not have been any snow in some places, Sometimes it rains here and it doesn't rain in town, Or it won't even be raining in town and I'll have a foot of snow here on the ground. So it's different sometimes.
Yeah, I think it comes in flurries. I think that's one of the things he said was that there had been some flurries of rain and snow in different areas right before the flood.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes a lot of sense. And then what sorts of problems did your family and your friends face during the flood?
Well, we were just down Larrabee Creek here, I think the best I can remember is about 20 miles on foot. And we lived down in a little place called Larrabee across from Holmes Flat. And basically we didn't have any problems, because we were self-sustained. We had our own water, and of course we didn't have electricity, but all the people across the river, our friends that lived on, and we thought the good side of the river, they were the ones that had the problems. They had no food, until the Coast Guard came in, and then the Army came in and brought food and water to everybody. But we did pretty good over there.
How did you find out about how things were going in different places when you didn't have electricity? So you must not have had radios to be able to know what was going on in different areas. How did you get word about what was going on?
Well, the Army helicopters came in, and somewhere I have a picture of them landing in a field behind our house, and they told us that Humboldt County was completely cut off. All the bridges were gone. So that was kind of shocking. Yeah.
And so you had family over in Pepperwood at the time, is that right?
Yes, we had my grandfather, my cousins, and my grandmother lived in Pepperwood. And they were farmers there.
And what happened over in Pepperwood?
Well, the river was coming up at 2 feet an hour. And that might not seem a lot to some people, but 2 feet an hour is pretty fast. You can stand there and watch it because, we always put markers in the ground. And it was coming up at 2 feet an hour because I was down on the river with my father, and my uncle, Bill Johnson, and they ran a little ferry boat that we had back and forth across the river. And so they had these little stakes in there. So they were measuring it, and vertically, not, spreading out like this. And so it was coming up so fast that, it surprised everybody. It caught them off guard. And so that's caused a lot of problems.
What happened?
Well, my grandfather had an old rowboat, and he said that there was a big water tower in the middle of Pepperwood, and so everybody got into that water tower. It was huge. It was probably 100 feet tall. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but it was pretty tall. Anyway, everybody got into that water tower, and my grandfather had this old rowboat. This was before motors, he didn't have a motor. And he was shuttling people back and forth to dry land out of that water tower. And then the river came up so fast that he was going back to get another. There were 6 people in there. I don't know the proper name for it, but one of them was an invalid, just a young person that couldn't, they were wheelchair bound. 6 people in that tower, and then the whole thing went over. And I don't think my grandmother was in there and 5 other people. I don't think they recovered anybody. I think they ended up in the ocean.
Wow.
Yeah, so then everybody's house was gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of the images of Pepperwood, and it's just so hard to imagine seeing Pepperwood as it is now, that the water just came right through there. It's just kind of like a area, a bend in the river where the water just kind of swept over.
Yeah, it just came up so fast. And it rained a lot. And I've heard stories about this snow thing that you were talking about, but, I've seen the river come up 10 years later, in 1974, 1973. I was running a ferry boat in Larrabee, and it was coming up 3 feet an hour, the same as 64, but another foot an hour more. But there was no pack in the mountains. So that leads me to believe that, it would have been worse if we'd had the same amount of snow in the mountains.
What I've heard too is that the rain, it was like a really warm rain.
No, what do they call them? A pineapple?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. It was just a warm rain, and when a warm rain hits snow, it goes that fast. It's just like dumping warm water on the snow. It's just going to come flying down a mountain. And it did. It did.
I've heard a lot about just, the number of days that it rained, because, I've lived up here for about 35 years myself, and you know how you get these rain spells, and it must have felt like that back then, that it just rained and rained and rained.
But, it seemed like it did that every winter. My dad remembers, when it Monument above Rio Dale used to be a ski place where everybody skied. They had a rope tow and everything. People would come to that place to ski. And I have pictures of my mom and dad with homemade skis. Dad would go out in the woods and cut down a tan oak, and he'd make his own skis. And they'd buy the bindings from Montgomery Ward's.
Wow, I never knew it snowed like that at Monument Hill.
Oh yeah, it was really 3 or 4 feet every winter.
Huh.
Yeah.
So you must have known a lot of families who were affected by the flood.
Oh boy. Yeah. Well, even in Larrabee, there were lower places, you know, downriver or down towards the river. Lots of, you know, farmhouses, and they were all washed away. Our grammar school was washed away. PL had a huge barn, larger than that one, twice the size of that one you saw when you came in. It ended up in Pepperwood, intact, with hay in it and everything.
Wow.
Yeah, it was something to see.
It's hard for me to imagine so you know that Harry Metaxas is my father-in-law. So his dad had a restaurant down in Weot, and it was wiped out in the 55 and the 64 flood. It's just so hard to imagine people willing to stay after something like that happens and rebuild. What sort of experience did you have with people? Did people have the sense that I'm getting the heck out of here and not coming back, or?
Well, my grandfather went through 3 floods, 1937, 64, or 37, 55, and then 64. So then he finally went to Bernie.
Yeah, I heard one of the women we interviewed, her uncle said, when asked if he was going to go back and rebuild, he said, people die in their sleep and they don't stop sleeping. So I thought that was pretty good.
That's a good one. Yeah, after a while, maybe you get it.
Yeah.
You know, after you've lost, well, your wife, and he had a big rock shop, and I never forget that. Other than, you know, my grandmother losing out, he was always complaining about. He had some $20 gold pieces in the Friendly Club. It was a little tavern there where all the farmers and ranchers went, you know. And he had $20 gold pieces on display in there, and down it went.
There might be some buried treasure there.
Oh, yeah.
How did people react in terms of helping each other out after the flood?
Oh, it's amazing. All the people that lived down by the river in Larrabee. Larrabee was a pretty good-sized community. And so, naturally, they lost everything, so they came up to us. I don't know, do you know any of the Rices? Bill Rice lived with us for probably a month. You know, him and his wife came up and lived with us, and they got washed out. They lived over in Larrabee at that time. And everybody just helped everybody, you know, just, you know, with cleaning and cooking, and everybody just pitch in.
Did people go back to some of these houses and try and dig the mud out, and, you know, if there were homes left, try and clean them up and get back into them?
Oh, yeah, they did, but what a job. You know, we would, my dad had one of those old fire pumps that you would stick in a stream, and then you could, you know, shoot water. I think he used it when he was dredging for gold. But anyway, he used that to, you know, to wash, you know, people's houses down inside to get all that silt out of there. Because if you don't get it out, mold will set in, and you know, it's got to be dried. So that was a big job. A lot of people, if their house didn't wash away, you know, I just remember all the neighbors pitched in and put things back as best they could.
I think they would have probably lost a lot of their clothing and, you know, things like that, and just have to replace that stuff.
Yeah, they did. You know, and we shared. Everybody that had extra stuff, we shared food and lived off a lot of venison. And then I think it was, I don't think it was the Coast Guard. All I remember is Army helicopters coming in, and they brought in clothes and, you know, cook stoves and water and things like that. But we really didn't need water because we had spring water. But we, you know, we needed clothes for the people that lost everything. And so.
What sort of food did they drop in?
Canned food, yeah. Like I said, you know, we didn't have as bad as some people did. I mean, we still had our lives, and I think they brought in propane and things like that, you know. Didn't have camp fuel back then, but You know, just kerosene lanterns they brought in, things like that. But the people we were concerned about lived along the river. We were way up. We were 50 feet above the river. So we just watched it.
Must have made a terrible noise as it was rolling through there.
Oh, well, the strangest thing I saw was the Larrabee Bridge. It was an old, really high piling bridge. And there was a big log jam backed up against it. And we watched it go over. You know, I was like 14, 15 years old, and that was, well, I couldn't believe what that was. And so we watched that go over, and then all these barns going down and cows, you know, live cows, and just floating down the river, and it was flying. It was really flying. That was my first experience running a boat at flood stage.
That's scary. Yeah. So, you know, one of the people we were talking to was saying that in some of these snarling masses that were going down the river, that there were actually rattlesnakes that were trapped in some of these and ending up down, you know, in Ferndale area, because, you know, they were starting up here where you had more, you know, inland heat, which is more rattlesnake country.
Yeah.
About that at all?
Oh yeah, like Alder Point, and you know, there's in the wintertime there's snake dens, you know, and they're not too far from water, and some of them are in rock crevices. You know, I've ran into several snake dens over the years, and some of them are big. And anyway, yeah, they ended up down in all strewn out all along the river. You know, they were lost out of their element. And
imagine if you're trying to break up some of these snarls and, you know, get these log jams through, you're out there in there and probably surprised by seeing some of these rattlesnakes.
yeah, as a matter of fact, when Morrison Jackson's log deck in Myers Flat washed down, ended up in Fernbridge and Lolita, and then PL's log deck and all their lumber went down to, and so they were down there picking it up in Lolita and Ferndale and mouth of the river, and they found rattlesnakes down there digging through, you know, because they had to sort, you know, Morrison Jackson had logs, and, you know, everybody was, and then the ranchers, oh, this is mine. They're trying to lay claim to it.
I've heard stories about that on both sides of people being hired by the lumber companies to go collect the lumber, and then people who just said, you know, fine, if you want to pay us for the damage that your logs caused, then you can do that and come get them, but, you know, somehow you're going to have to settle up.
Oh yeah, it was a war for a while.
So another thing I heard about some of these cattle that are flowing down the river, I don't know, probably not so much up here, but down at Ferndale we heard that they were going all the way out to the ocean, and that some of the helicopters were trying to keep them kind of corralled and keep them back on land, that they were actually getting into the ocean. Did you hear anything?
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, you know, cattle aren't swimmers. You know, and some of them we saw going down, you know, they were belly up, you know, just drowned. But they're not, you know, I've never seen one walk into a river and start swimming, you know. And so they were just, they were, you know, it was kind of sad to see them going down. And, you know, there's a lot of cattle along the river. And some of the land just, you know, it washed away and the cattle were on it. You know, and there were streams cutting in and then leaving a little island there, and so the cattle had no place to go, and pretty soon that island would be gone and the cattle would go with it. So it was, yeah, and then I remember my uncle saying that there were, you know, the helicopters were trying to get them onto shore, but didn't do much good. They lost a lot of cattle.
Just imagining the cleanup after something like that, where you've had so many cattle died. I know in Ferndale, you know, they took them out to Centerville Beach and, you know, used heavy equipment to bury them.
Mm-hmm.
But along the rivers here, there probably were a lot of dead animals, both domestic animals and wildlife, I would imagine, died in the flood.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Of course, we were in kind of a narrow canyon, so nothing really got left. You know, I never saw any along the river. The only thing I saw was we found a backpack from one of the helicopters that crashed. We found the guy's, he was, I don't know, Army, you know, and he drowned. I don't remember where that helicopter crashed, upriver somewhere around McCann. I think it hit a wire or a telephone wire or something. But we found his backpack and turned it into the some agency.
Yeah, it was McCann where the helicopter went down, and I hadn't heard about it hitting a wire, but just knew that the helicopter had gone down.
Yeah.
Did farmers and ranchers, did they lose some of their land, their actual acreage?
Oh, I saw 40 to 60 acre pieces of ground gone, literally gone, just wiped out. And people don't realize, there's always been floods. I don't know if you ever knew an old guy named, his name was Guy Curlis. We called him Strychnine. He took me up 100 feet higher than the '64 flood and showed me a piece of driftwood that floated in above Holmes Flat. He said, this river has been up and down like a yo-yo. But in the old days, it was deeper, and so, but what happened, everybody wants to blame everything, and I'm not sticking up for the loggers, but everybody wants to blame the loggers for everything. But what it was, my grandfather explained it to me because he helped build roads for, it was the Division of Highways back then, not Caltrans. He said in the old days they couldn't haul, they had no means to haul all the, I call it broadcast, all the stuff that, when you're digging in a bank to build a road. They built 101, followed the river. They built the railroad, followed the river, and shoved all that topsoil, everything, rocks and everything, it went into the river. They didn't haul it off. It just went over. So what that did is it filled the river bottom up. So when the river bottom gets filled up, it has to go up higher, right? And when it goes up higher, it takes in more land. And pretty soon it fills up even higher. And then all of a sudden it's like a snowball effect. Pretty soon it just keeps getting higher and higher and higher. And then when you have a big flood like, 55 and 64, people just don't realize the damage that was done back then. All that from Willits all the way down to Eureka, that whole railroad, they just shoved everything in the river. They didn't have any way to haul it off.
So it seems like they're causing more problems for themselves down the line by...
Well, they didn't know any better.
When they built the railroad, they did that, but then when the flood destroyed the railroad, then they took all that debris and dumped it as well.
Oh, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, it was, just, they didn't know any better. People, well, I guess we don't look into the future too far.
Yeah, we're not really good at that as a species.
Yeah.
Were there other stories that other people shared with you about the flood that you'd like to tell? Anything?
Yeah, just, I remember my boss down at Scotia, they brought all that lumber back into, what they could salvage. They brought it back and they had to wash all that. He said it was the worst job he ever had. He was the foreman and he had to work out there like a slave. He said he had to hose down because that was the nicest lumber in the world. Some of it's in this cabin, just that really clear old growth redwood. He had to wash that all down by hand, and it was just a big job. It was work for everybody. And in the town of Scotia, there's watermarks inside that mill, in the office and everything. So I think one of the funniest stories it happened to me personally. My dad, just before the flood, and my uncle kind of broke me in on this boat, the little county ferry. And back then, nobody cared. County didn't know about it, of course, but it was a county boat. But anyway, so the flood had gone down, and there were railroad workers. This was about maybe 2 weeks after the flood. They wanted to come over and do some repair on a railroad trestle. And the river was still almost at flood stage, And I was just getting ready to get, my uncle and my dad went to work, and I was just getting ready to get on a school bus, and here came these railroad workers. And they said, where's the captain of the ferry at? And I go, they just left. And I said, you want to go across, you better get in now because, and there was driftwood coming down still, and it was still high, you know, and you had to weave your way through the driftwood. And this one railroad guy, he goes, I'm not getting in that boat with you. He said, you're not even old enough to, you're still in high school. And I said, well, if you want to get across that river, that's the only way you're going to get across there. And I've been driving this boat for years, which I told the story. But anyway, so they finally go, okay. So they got in, and I took them across, and man, they were sweating bullets all the way. We were dodging logs and stuff, and then I sheared a pin on, you know, there's the prop is on a little pin. I sheared that thing off and pulled the motor up, and then I had to drive that pin out and put another one, and we're floating down the river. These guys are having a cow. And so I got it fired back up, and so then I went along the edge where the driftwood always hangs together. So I went along the edge where there was no driftwood, and then you go way up high, and then you work your way back through the drift, and then I got to the other side. I didn't have a problem, but boy, they did.
Wow, that is wild.
Oh yeah, they said, we're not coming back till your dad gets home. He can come and get us.
Wow, amazing stories. Anything else you'd like to share? I think we've covered quite a bit of experiences.
Oh, just, I don't know, it was just a lot of memories, you know, just, it seemed like the worst thing that happened to us, my cousin and I, they took us to town, you know, they said, you guys got to go back to school. We didn't want to go back to school. Oh, you got to ride in a helicopter. No, we don't know anybody in town. There's no place to stay. Oh yeah, we already got places for you. So we flew out in a helicopter and stayed in town, and, you know, it was kind of neat to see because there was a lot of people that, you know, opened their houses. And, you know, people do that, you know, when natural disasters happen. And then we found out there was lots of people staying in town, and we weren't the only ones. But we didn't want to go back to school. We were, you know, it was like a vacation for us because we didn't get hurt in the flood. You know, well, maybe we lost our friends and, you know, things like that, but we were just having fun. You know,
It's different when you're a teenager, huh?
oh yeah, you know. I didn't even know anything until I went to town. I didn't know because we were isolated. We were probably there for 2 or 3 weeks. And so we got used to it, and we thought, wow, we don't have to go to school. We're done.
And then you went and you saw all these other people.
Oh my goodness, yeah,
How
we
widespread that was.
were up in that helicopter, you know, several hundred feet, and saw Pepperwood was ruined and leveled, and Stafford, all the bridges were gone. You know, I just couldn't believe those bridges. So Humboldt County literally was cut off. There was no way in and out of here. And you know, my grandfather said if they would have taken the original road, the wagon trail, from Bell Springs like they originally did, there would have never been any problems. The only place you'd had a bridge is at Alder Point in Bridgeville. Only 2 bridges. But they wanted a big hurry to get to Humboldt County, so they went down the river instead of going through that open land. Yeah.
Well, there's been a couple times when people have been forced to take that road.
Oh, Bell Springs Road? Yeah.
Just recently, was it like 2 years ago?
Oh, the big slide?
The big slide. And everybody's like, oh yeah, Bell Springs Road.
Yeah, it's still there. And nothing happens to that. Well, you know, the Indians took it, and then the wagon trains, you know, and the stagecoach. I've seen pictures down here with the stagecoach did at Bridgeville store. They had a stage stop there. And it was San Francisco stage was there at Bridgeville. Or they call it the Blocksburg stage.
Right, that's right. And then did they have one down at Fort Seward too?
Yeah.
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 I know the Nunnamakers, and they told me that they had pictures, like really old pictures.
Oh, Fred and Marlene? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're friends of mine.
I figured.
Yeah.
You probably knew them.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I'm going to take my boat up the river and take it for a ride up to Alder Point. They want to go for a ride, so got to stop by. We've been joking about this for a while.
Hey, Jennifer, can I cross-examine?
tour.
I was
So I'm
talking
going
to
to have you still look at me and just.
Yeah, in fact, I could probably walk around a little closer to behind Jennifer, because we're trying to keep that same look. You know, when I talked to Leon, Pete,
Yeah.
he was saying that I was trying to figure out why your grandmother Florence had these people in her house, like Les and Regina Brooke and their son Kelly, and
Right.
that was the developmentally disabled young man. I was trying to figure out why they were in your grandmother's house, and Leon said they had come across to the restaurant, Althea Noy's restaurant, to kind of, because it was kind of considered high ground. So do you know anything about that? He also said Les Brooke was a doctor.
I don't know if he was a doctor or not, because I didn't live in Pepperwood at the time. Although I knew those people, I just, at my age, just 14 or 15, I didn't, one person was no different than another. If he was a doctor, well, if Leon said he was, he probably was.
And so you were wondering about.
So
why
just
they
wondering
were-
what you knew about how come they all ended up in that restaurant.
Well, because it was a higher spot there. As I remember, my grandfather's place wasn't up on a little knoll, and that restaurant was close to, was it Bames? Was that the name of it?
Was it Tower Motor Court or something? Tower.
Well, there was a court there, and then there was Millsap's. There was a Shell station, and Millsap had a gas station. But then behind that was where that tower was, behind that restaurant. And so I think that was the logical place to go, to the highest ground. And then they ended up in that water tower.
So that's really where your grandmother was. Her body was found in that restaurant, then upstairs.
Well, I don't remember.
I remember that part. Okay.
I don't remember if.
Yeah.
I just thought everybody was disappeared.
Yeah.
I never did know the whole history of that.
Well, Leon was older than you.
Right.
He was gone in the Navy, and he came back for your grandmother's funeral. And that's where he probably got brought up to speed about what happened.
Right.
Yeah, and you were younger then.
Yeah.
I can understand that. But I just thought I'd cross-examine you about
Oh no, that's fine.
Just one thing, Pete. You've articulated really well about how people came together as rural folk, and it was kind of nothing big, nothing different. You guys always are that way. But one of the possible angles of the film was, if this would happen again, still rural people would probably still be the same as opposed to an urban area. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that as far as people who come together and what might happen again in another flood of that size.
I think, well, you have a lot of different people, influx of different people now. And maybe, I think the locals, and there's good in everybody. And I think the locals, would help each other out pretty much. But I also see an element in this that is in this county. Even when things get bad, they're to themselves. They want to take care of themselves, and just run and hide somewhere. It just seems like it's that way in certain places. The old timers are gone. It's just the whole world's different than it was. There's a few that would chip in, but.
Do you think people are still self-sufficient enough to, in the last flood, where they would refuse the food that the Red Cross was bringing in, thinking somebody else might need it more than they would?
You mean in the outlying areas?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean myself, I wouldn't have any problems here. I could stay here for eternity, and I would refuse. I'd send. Go wherever you can go. And there's a lot of hill people still, if you want to call us hill people, that, we're self-sufficient, we wouldn't need anything, maybe a few items, but, and then there are people who would take it whether they needed it or not, unfortunately. But that's just the way people are.
I was wondering about one of the things that we've talked about about making this film is that there's so many people in Humboldt County that are really kind of handy. You know, like the professions are, you know, they worked in the logging industry, so they worked with mechanical things, or they worked in farming, they worked with tractors.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like when you're trying to recover from something like a major disaster, those are the people that you want there around you, because they seem to know, you know, what needs to be done and able to do it. I mean, I think, you know, as versus, you know, some natural disaster that happens in an urban area where people are used to, you know, just using their computers all day long and really don't have a lot of other skills. What do you think about that?
Oh, it's, you know, I think everybody brings something different to the table. You know, like my dad was a blacksmith, and he, you know, you couldn't run to town for a part, you know, so, you know, if in a disaster or something, he could make you a part. You know, he could make a knife, a butcher knife or whatever. You know, and I have friends up the river, you know, like Fred, you know, Nunamaker, you know, he can do things, you know, to help other people. And Whitlow's, of course, he's a wealth of knowledge. You know, he can run a sawmill and literally cut out enough boards to put you up a house if you lost your house. You know, there's enough old timers left around that can do those kind of things. A lot of the old arts have lost, though. You know, unfortunately, I'm not a blacksmith. I should have watched my dad a little more. I can make knives and things like that, but you know, to make a part for a tractor, they used to have to do that. And there's a lot of people around that can still do that.
Very good. Any
great.
other questions?
Well, Kate, what we're going to do is we're going to do have silence for 30 seconds for rim tone, just to help us with the editing for background noise. So I'm just going to count off 30 seconds, and we'll just kind of be quiet for that. Okay, starting. Felt like a minute, but that was 30
Actually,
seconds.
that was faster than it normally feels like. It normally feels like it takes forever.
This is probably imposing, but we like to get some establishing shots of folks too. Do you like playing guitar in front of folks? Do you mind strumming something? Or
Oh, I don't know. I could pick something out, and if I
At least
mind
hold
doing
it.
that? Like break?
are you a guitar player?
Yeah.
Well, that's probably not even a tune.
Want me to tune it?
You could do that. Can I get up?
Yeah.
You're actually attached.
Oh,
You're a test
Yeah.
tube.
You
And I
wanna-
think we're gonna
you have that little plug in, don't you?
Yeah, you know, I think we're gonna try to get you though.
Okay.
Still sitting there holding the guitar.
Oh yeah, I could do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. That would be nice.
Actually, we'll leave that mic on for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Just leave it.
What's that guy? Like, you know, I'm not a guitar
Well,
player.
that's fine.
I just,
It's more than just, it looks like it'd be a nice shot to have you just hold it there.
anybody sees this, they're gonna go, "Hey, that guy doesn't know how to play guitar."
It's just more a part of what you like to do.
You know what? I need to pick.
I don't, but that'll work.
Oh, look. Well, I haven't picked this thing up in a long time.
It looks good though.
Great, it's looking good.
boy.
Ghost Riders in the Sky.
A little practice. A little practice. Well, I bet I haven't picked this thing up in a year.
I was putting you on the spot.
Yeah, you did.